Payback period. How do you do it in Excel? The problem with the payback period is that there is no function for it in Excel, which kind of means that we need to make our own function using VBA or Visual Basic Applications, which is the programming language of Excel. So before we do that, I thought we'd just look at a brief example here, and I will show you how to do it with the worksheet functions, and then we'll move on to do the programming. Why are we doing it that way? Well, you kind of need to understand the logic before you can start programming. If you don't know the logic, then it's really hard to do programming. So we have an example here. We have a project that lasts for 5 years and has cash flows there. So in year 0, we have the investment costs. So we have a negative cash flow of minus 56,000. And then in year 1 of the project, we have a positive cash flow of 17,500. And as you can see, we have cash flows for year 2, 3, 4, and 5. So when is the payback period? And the theory here is basically that payback period is just how many years does this take before the investment cost has been paid back. And we don't take into consideration the time value of money here. So how do we do it? Well, we need to calculate the cumulative cash flow. So you can do that over here in cell D3. So I start by typing in an equal sign, and then I write the sum. Can use the tab to autocomplete it. Then we select cell C3, and then I'm gonna hit colon here, so that we automatically get C3 and C3. I'm gonna click F2 here to enable editing mode, and I'm gonna go to the left here with the arrow keys, and once I'm over the first C3 here, I just hit F4. If you are on desktop, that is, any of the F1 buttons probably don't work on a laptop. There you have to use F and F4 because the F lock might be engaged. We have an end parenthesis here, and we click enter. Then we can autocomplete it, so I can use control arrow key down to teleport to the bottom here. I add a placeholder string such as an asterisk, control arrow key up to teleport up. And then I press and hold Control, Shift, and I tap the arrow key down, F2, and then Control Enter. So this is the cumulative cash flow, and the next step here is to use your human intellect to figure out that when does it switch from being negative to being positive. So as we can see here, in year 2, it is still a negative. However, in year 3 here, it becomes positive. So that means that the payback occurs in year 3, but it won't exactly be in 3 years. It will be somewhere between 2 and 3 years, because in year 3 here, the cumulative cash flow is above 0. So if it was exactly equal to 0, then it would be exactly 2 years of payback. So, can we get more precision than this? And the answer is no, unless we want to make additional assumptions. And the typical assumption to make here is that the cash flow that occurs in year 3, in this particular case, happens uniformly. So we would get 39,688, then we divide that by 12 months, then we have like how much money you get every month, so you can divide it by every day or every week. So we have to assume, if you want more precision here, that this cash flow here of almost 40,000 occurs evenly throughout the year. And if you're willing to make that assumption, then we can kind of calculate more precisely exactly when between year 2 and 3 does the payback occur. So we're going to do that with worksheet functions here first. So equal sign. We're going to take 0 minus the cumulative cash flow in year 2. And then we're going to divide it by the cumulative cash flow in year 3 minus the previous cumulative. There we go. So that will be the partial, and we need to add 2 years. So the payback occurs somewhere between year 2 and 3, and if we make the uniformity assumption, then it occurs after 2.3 years approximately. And this is basically how you do it with worksheet functions. And this is kind of cumbersome, kind of annoying, because you have one column here of cash flows, and you have to make another column to get the cumulative. Then you need to look up here, okay, when does it switch from negative to positive? And then you need to do some additional calculation over here. That is a bit too many steps, if you ask me, especially if you have more than one project. So imagine if you had one project with cash flows in column C, another one in D, E, and F. If there are 5 projects, then you would need like 10 columns and then an additional 5 cells. We can do better than that. So we're going to use VBA, Visual Basic Applications. You have the developer tab up here. We don't need it though, but it's there. Yeah, you can use a shortcut to open up the VBA editor. So Alt F11. And usually this area would be gray, but I have already opened up a module here. If you don't have a module, if it's gray, then you can click up here on Insert. And then on here module, you can click on it and will open up this notepad lookalike area. So we're going to make a function. So we start off by typing function, and the module, which is this white area, can be used for 2 things. It can be used for making a subroutine, also called a macro, or it can be used for making a function. In this case, we're going to make a function. After writing function here, we need to write in a valid name. So I'm going to type in payback period. That's a valid name because it's not in use and it does not contain any kind of special character, which is not permitted. There's a quick note there. It needs to be in 1 word. Having space here would be an invalid name. Inside the parentheses here, we need to specify the input data, input variables. So I'm going to make a variable called CF, which is short for cash flow, which you couldn't basically call whatever you want. You could call it rabbit if you wanted to. Then I'm going to specify the data type. In this case, it is a range. So range C3 all the way to C8. So it's going to be a range. Outside of this parentheses, I need to specify the data type of the output of this function. So the output in this example, it was 2.3, so that's a numeric variable, but also decimal. So we're going to specify double. So double is just a numeric variable that allows for decimals. Let's see, and I forgot to write here as double. There we go. No, for the time being, we're just going to put in double here. And later on, we're going to change this to variant, but just to be a little bit pedagogical here, we're just going to start with double. So inside here, what are we going to do? Well, I think the first step here will be to figure out, we need to calculate the cumulative cash flow. So my approach here is going to be to make a for loop, which is looping through each cell of the cash flow. In a for loop, you need to know how many iterations are you going to do. And that we kind of know is just the number of cells in this input range. So we're just gonna make a variable here that tells me like the integer, how many cash flows are there. So num, let's see, you can call it num time periods. Num time periods is going to equal to CF, which is the variable we named up here. If you call it rabbit, then we will be calling it rabbit down here. And then have full stop here, rows dot count. So we are counting the number of rows in the range or variable named CF. Then we're going to write a for loop here for I. Let's call it t actually. For t equals 1 to number of time periods. I'm just going to copy paste that down here. There we go. And then next t. So this is the structure of the for loop. Everything that's between these 2 lines will be repeated num time periods number of times. Outside of here, I need some initial values for some variables. We're going to have a counter, which is going to be equal to 0, which is just keeping track of which time period are we in. And then we also add a variable here called sum, which is just equal to 0. In here, we're going to write sum is equal to itself. So in mathematics, let's see, hold that thought for a second. So sum equals sum plus cash flow row t. And I can never quite remember if it's supposed to be row or rows. I guess we'll find that out. So essentially what the function is doing right now is just to calculate the cumulative sum throughout all the 5 time periods and the initial cash flow. So the output of this function will be 86,251. That's not exactly what we want. We need to know when is the cumulative cash flow becoming equal to 0 or greater. So we're going to use an if function here. If sum is greater or equal to 0, then, let's see, just add the whole structure here first. If that is the case, then we're going to exit this for loop. We're just going to interrupt it. The for loop is supposed to run for 6 iterations because there are 6 cash flows in here. But once this condition here is fulfilled, then we will exit. So this will happen when we are in the third cash flow here, or the fourth, I guess, in the third time period. So we will only execute then 4 different iterations. We won't go all the way through. Exit 4. If that's not the case, then we're going to increment the counter. So counter equals counter plus 1. So what I was about to say here, like in mathematics, this is nonsensical. The sum cannot be equal to itself plus something else. They will be not equal. So the equal sign here it means that we are assigning. We are assigning the value of sum plus this new cash flow to the variable named sum. And this is what's a bit confusing about VBA. It is using the equality for mathematics, the equal sign, and also the assignment operator is just both an equal sign. In most other programming language, we would use equal sign for assignment and a double equal sign, for instance, to test for equality, essentially. So in here in VBA, we just use the same sign, equal. And VBA is presumably smart enough to understand what is what here. So in the end here, this function will not output anything because we have not specified it to output anything. So this calculating here in integer terms, like when the payback occurs, so we need to output that. So payback period, that's the name of the function. We need to assign some value to that. That's going to be equal to counter. So let's try to implement this in the worksheet. So if I write equal here and start typing payback, you see that the function we just made is available here. Highlight the cash flows and then click enter. And yeah, I guess we needed to have rows there, not row. So I was almost remembering correctly. If you're in debugging mode here, like it won't let you leave, so you need to click F5 and all the issues are resolved. Voila, here in the worksheet, as you can see, this payback period function we made has now an output of 3. So this means that the payback occurs in time period 3. And we could stop there. However, as we did up here with the worksheet functions, we wanted some decimals. In order to do that, we need to do have some additional assumptions. So we can update the function here to accommodate for these additional assumptions, basically. So how would we do that? Well, as you remember, to get these decimals here, we need to take in the numerator 0 minus negative 12,000 and divide that by the difference between 27,688 and negative 12,000. So we can do that up here, I suppose we could. So you can call that partial. And partial is going to be equal to, actually, we're going to run out of space. I'm going to call this numerator. 0 minus the sum, but not going to be the sum because you already added one cash flow here. So we need to subtract cash flow dot rows t, and then the denominator is going to be equal to, well, the difference between this cumulative cash flow and this cumulative. So the difference between sum minus the very same thing up here. Let's see if we got enough parentheses here. That seems to work. So plus here the numerator divided by the denominator. So num is just short for numerator, while up here num was just short for number of time periods. I guess that could be a little confusing. That's just my naming convention here. It wasn't all that smart. One thing we need to remember here is that this counter here is equal to 3, so we need to kind of get it to be a 1 before that. So I'm just going to subtract 1 here. I think that's the easy solution. So let's see if that works. Usually, when you do a lot of if functions, then you get it wrong on the first end. And well, wow, I'm better than I thought. No, don't worry, I'll practice a little bit. Okay, so yeah, it works. That's how you do it with VBA. There is one thing though I want to fix in this function. It works for this example, but what would happen if there is no payback? So for instance, so mine said 6,000, so let's say minus 200,000. Well, you see after the project is done, the cumulative cash flow is still like a negative almost 60,000, so we never have a payback. And it no longer works really here. This one is not going to work because it's hard coded to the particular cell. So forget this one. This one is incorrect because we hard coded it. But the payback period VBA function that we made, you would think it would work, but it does not. And why is that? Because this one here never kicks in. You never satisfy this condition, so we need to fix it. So how do we do that? I think the easiest is just to add an if condition when we are outputting the result there. So if sum is greater or equal to 0, then we get what we just did. And we already verified that works. However, we're going to add in an else condition here. And when you make these if and else functions, you always need to have this end if in the end. So what was thinking? Yeah. So if the cumulative cash flow is negative by the time we have looped through all of the cash flows, then we're just gonna add the string here. So open what's this? Open quotation, end quotation, and inside of this we're gonna type in no payback. So either the payback will have like a decimal number here as an output or an integer, or it will get the string no payback. This works except for the fact that we kind of specify the data type of this payback period variable, which is like the function itself. And we specified it as double. This is not going to work because suddenly we have the possibility of a string here. So what do you do when you have a data type that can be like both a numeric variable but also a string? Well, in VBA, this depends a lot from programming language to programming language. But in VBA, we can specify this as a variant. On what exactly is a variant? Well, it's kind of like a Frankenstein's monster type of data type. It's just like all possible data types. Excel will just automatically select whichever data type it requires. So here it will probably go for like something also numeric, and here it will go for a string basically. So back here, let's see, F2 and then enter, no payback. It no longer works. So if instead here we had, I don't actually remember what the previous was. There, 56. So yeah, that's how you do payback period in Excel. We did with worksheet functions, which is not that difficult. It's pretty easy and straightforward to do. The only thing we could do to improve the worksheet function approach would to be to use some kind of if function in the worksheet to just figure out exactly when is the payback occurring. It is not that difficult to do, but it is cumbersome and you would need more space. So all in all, pretty easy to do these worksheet functions, but I would actually recommend to use VBA instead, especially if you have like several projects. If you had the cash flows for each project in columns next to each other. So in column A you have project 1, in B you have project 2, in C you have project 3, and so on and so forth. Then this approach here will be kind of cumbersome. So that's why I actually recommend you to use VBA. So let's see if I'm able to fit this all on the screen. Yeah, there we go. So just to recap, it's a VBA function. We write function, then the name of the function, then the input and its data type, and then the data type of the output. We figure out how many cash flows there are by counting how many rows there is in this range. Then we have a for loop here. Before we start the for loop, we need to make some initiate the variables, the sum variable and the counter variable, set them equal to 0. Inside here, we calculate the running cumulative cash flow. If the cumulative cash flow suddenly becomes greater than 0, then we calculate the partial here. We exit this for loop, which means that we are not doing all the 6 iterations in this example. We are leaving before that. In the end here, we have an if then else statement to determine to give this numeric calculation or just to output this generic string. So yeah, that's how you do a payback period with VBA in Excel. So if you like the video, please comment, like and subscribe and hit that bell thing for notification or something. See you guys around.